Welcome back, everybody, to Fly the Coop. We're so glad to have you today. I am with my love, Steve Wasnick. Hello, honey.
Hello.
You know, it's busy out here at DIY Designer Homestead. We're into our second year and we have a lot of projects going on, don't we, honey?
I've not been aware of any. Perhaps you can enlighten us.
Well, I can't wait for you. Steve has spent years and especially deep dived since we purchased this property. We have 15 and a half acres. And we thought it'd be a perfect time to share with everybody what we're doing with gardening because it's June and we had a long winter and people are running a little behind schedule. And until I met Steve, I never knew anything about Hugo culture gardening. So, honey, why don't you share your beautiful mind with everybody and tell us all about it? We'd love to hear.
I don't know how much I actually know. I learn as I grow. Carrie Ann just actually pulled me away from the chickens. I was busy tending chickens. Chickens are actually part of the garden process as well. But hugelkultur, German, really what you're doing is you're sequestering carbon in the ground. So instead of the traditional, I'm kind of combining that with a no-till method, which if you look into no-till, you'll start to realize that tilling of our soils is largely responsible for the deletion of the soil structure that we had. We're down to just across the country and in many places around the world, we're down to just inches of topsoil. And that's one of the big reasons why we're so, as a country, we're so dependent on all of these fertilizers. And you may well have been hearing about the shortages of fertilizers, the chemical fertilizers that are out there. And of course, we grow a lot of the crops that we grow commercially are heavily dependent on getting a ton of fertilizer, like corn, for example. Instead of doing that, what we're trying to do here is be entirely chemical free in our gardens, but also because I'm a lazy gardener, I don't really like doing the work if I don't have to. I'd rather just sit back and watch things grow, let someone else do the work. So we're doing the work up front, and it's a very slow, the way we're doing it, it's a very slow and painful process because these aren't just your traditional garden in your backyard sort of scenarios. These are big gardens, and I'll explain it, but you can absolutely do this on a much smaller scale at home, using the same techniques. You don't have to have, we're doing it on a larger scale. So we've got a little tractor with a backhoe, digging what amounts to, I know Carrie Ann loves it when I explain it this way, digging what amounts to graves in the ground. They're maybe not as deep as a real grave, but about 5 foot deep, and they're, easily 8 foot long and probably 4 foot wide. And that's a lot of material to move, and it's all clay here. So once you move it, then you got to find somewhere to put it and all yada, yada. We're actually using it to create pads for some sheds and things. So we're building little building pads for that, for, the chicken coop that'll be built in the not too distant future. You could say sheds and stuff, trying to clean up our garage. So everything kind of comes together, I guess, when you talk about gardening, everything kind of comes into play, because it's, everything from the equipment. Obviously, we're leveraging the chickens. We're, because a lot of what we're going to grow is actually going back to the chickens as well. So sort of that continual loop. But so hugelkultur itself, been around for thousands of years, German originally, as I understand it. I'm not the expert. You can Google it. It's Hugelkultur, I believe. But in essence, what you're doing is, for us, we're digging the hole, and then we're filling it. We're filling it with wood, specifically hardwoods, staying away from coniferous trees. You want to go with deciduous trees, things that don't have the resin, like pine, that sort of thing. It's not going to break down. The goal here is you're trying to encourage fungal growth. It's heavily dependent upon fungus, which is, they say the largest living thing in the world is the whole fungal network. And it all not only kind of communicates to each other all around the world, as I've learned, but also it helps, it brings nutrients up from the soil. So we're getting the wood into the hole. It's partially rotted. We're pulling things out of the woods, trees that have fallen, for example. We've got a few oaks here. Some of those have gone down over time. But anything, oaks, maples, whatnot, like I say, deciduous trees, ideally get some stuff that's rotted, maybe some stuff that's not quite as rotted yet. So that'll continue to break down over time. But that'll encourage the fungal growth. And the fungal growth brings nutrients, the minerals, up from deep in the soil. And it kind of tickles the roots of the plants that are growing downward. And in so doing, it creates a symbiotic relationship. So it's providing a lot of additional nutrients that you don't really think about when you're planting a garden. You're not really imagining the roots of your plants being able to pull something up from, maybe 10 feet down below the soil where a lot of the minerals are, and we just never touch it. Whereas the fungal growth, the fungus can and does. And then, so it's that symbiotic relationship where the fungus is also then taking advantage of the photosynthesis happening in the plants from above, and the two of them intermix down at the root level.
They talk to each other.
They play nicely together. It's just a great symbiotic relationship. But the other real benefit of this, well, a few benefits, is, you are sequestering carbon. In so doing, so instead of just having, burning all of this wood that's, as we're trying to clean up the property and whatnot. And we happen to have a ton of buckthorn here, which is an invasive species. I think we've all been nicked by it. It's got, up to like 2-inch thorns. I mean, they're, it's like getting stabbed with little knives. And with our 2 dogs, it's, I was just commenting.
Very invasive.
Yeah. And it's dangerous. I mean, if you're not careful, you go through the woods and you get stabbed.
There's a lot of cleanup going on, but if they don't have a big property like we do, they still can do this.
Yeah. So on a, we're doing it, like I say, on a large scale. I'll wrap up the way we're doing it. So we dig the hole, we put in the wood, and a lot of it is the buckthorn, because buckthorn is really nitrogen rich. And in fact, buckthorn is sort of like a healing plant. And I know a lot of people don't look at it that way. They look at it as a pain in the butt. And it is. But it also, one of the reasons why it's one of the natural plants out there that really infuses a ton of nitrogen back into the soil. When it dies, you'll see kind of a little cornucopia of growth coming out of where the buckthorn has died and fallen and is degrading. So it's actually replenishing. It's, the Earth's way, one of the many ways the Earth protects itself. So it's where we're stripping all the nutrients out of the soil, the traditional farming methods. Buckthorn in this scenario, which is one of the reasons why it's so prevalent here, is because the soil has been stripped away. The nutrients have been. So buckthorn grows to kind of heal things. And I imagine over hundreds of years, it may, as the soil becomes enriched, the buckthorn may not grow as well here. But anyway, all things that I've read, I'm not the expert. So we fill it with a lot of, rotted deciduous trees, throw in a lot of buckthorn, fill it up with that. And then we leverage our chickens, the chicken manure mixed with all of the wood chips. That goes on top of a bunch of the branches. And then, because we've not been here long enough to really do much in terms of composting in large volume, eventually we will. But we buy from a great local place, Burrell's Black Dirt, I think they're called. But they do a lot of composting. So it's like 90% leaf compost, which is another thing I think we've talked about before. But all the people that I see that rake up their leaves and put them out at the curb, you are literally giving away absolute gardening gold. I have never in my life had a better garden, and I put everything I could buy at the store, Home Depot, whatever, from manure to, you name it, I put it on my gardens. And I've never had such an incredible garden than I have simply by using composted leaves that I lazily raked into a corner of my yard for years, and then eventually pulled it all out and put it on my garden. Had a fantastic, the best garden I've ever had that year. So the compost that we buy by the truckload, because these are big holes, is 90% leaf compost. And it's amazing stuff. So keep your leaves, don't get rid of them, use them for something, just put them in a corner. The pile will dissipate on its own. You can go and turn it if you want, if you're,
Do you think a lot of people don't even realize that happens, perhaps? Like that if they leave it long enough? They actually turn their leaf pile into
Probably. And I
soil.
think some of it is people just don't want to see the pile of leaves in the corner, probably think it looks unsightly, you know, someone like you. Whereas I don't care. I'm fine with that. So, but you can make it pretty if you want. You can build a little seat or something around it, whatever. You know, grow some vines on it.
The ongoing debate around beauty versus practicality.
Yeah. Yes. It's a good one. But so that's what we're doing. And then you just plant right on top of that. And then year after year, you're not adding any chemical fertilizers, anything. It actually, as that wood degrades and more of the fungal growth happens, the garden gets better year after year. So by year 10, your garden is better than year 1.
Which is fascinating.
All we will do, we're not going to till it. I mean, even when we cut out plants at the end, take plants out at the end of the year, we're not, unless it's a potato or something, we're not pulling anything out of the ground. We're just cutting everything down at ground level and leaving the roots, let them be. Depending on what it is we're growing, we may mulch a little bit over it just to protect something that's, you know, like a perennial. Or come spring, we'll just take more of the leaf compost and put that over the top and start planting. So it's a really simple way to, the lazy way to have what ultimately is going to be the best garden you've ever had. If you're going to be in your location for some time to come, at least for the next few years, this is definitely worth doing. And how you can do it at your own place is the same concept. You're just not doing it on a large scale. So if not you, probably someone that you know has a stack of old firewood, rotted stuff that's sitting on the side of their shed or side of their garage or something, and they want to get rid of it. So you can get it for free from your neighbors if you don't already have it, or just collect sticks that fall from the trees in your yard, that sort of thing. But someone has a bunch of, you know, old rotted firewood that's no longer good for burning in the fireplace. That's ideal. As long as it's hardwoods, that's ideal. Get some of that, dig a hole wherever you're going to do your gardens, flowers or vegetables or whatever, dig down, put some of that wood in, just cover it back up with the soil and plant. It's really, if you want to keep it simple, it's really that simple. The other things that I just haven't been experimenting with, we certainly have it, but is creating biochar. So I used to, up at our cabin, I used to create my own charcoal, wood charcoal, using like 55-gallon drums, which that's a whole nother topic. But really what you're doing is you're simply taking the gas out of wood. I say that, you know, like trees are batteries. They're holding a lot of energy, but you have to extract it, right? And so I'll say to people, I have a little fire making technique that I've learned. It's called the upside down fire. But the whole concept behind that really is that wood doesn't burn, and people never really understand that. And the reason why I say that is because it's not the wood that burns, rather it's the wood gas. It's the gas that's locked inside the cell structure of the wood that burns. And
fascinating as well.
The only way you see it when you have a fire in your fireplace, for example, you'll see as a piece of wood actually catches on fire, some logs, you'll see like little streaks, like someone has a little Bic lighter in there or something, and it's shooting a flame out. And you may never have really thought about it, but that is a spot on that wood where the wood gas is starting to be released. And the wood gas, think of it like propane or whatever, that's what's burning. But it's sucking that, it's pulling that out of the wood. It's finally being released. And the way to release it, the reason why you can't take a big log and light a match to it and have it burn is because the wood gas isn't being released. And the way to release it mechanically is to heat it. You have to get it hot enough such that the wood gas now starts to come out once it is hot enough, and then that wood gas will burn. That's why you can't take a big log and light it, but you can take a tiny little dry twig, and put a match to that. And that will probably, if it's dry enough, that will probably start burning. And that's simply because it takes so little energy to heat that up such that the wood gas from that little twig starts to burn. That's why most people start making a fire with little kindling, little things, and put bigger things on top. I just do it in reverse. I put the big things on the bottom, and I smaller and smaller to the top. And then I light the stuff on top, and I let that heat extract the wood gas from the stuff below. And so it just burns downward. It's an upside down fire, but it's, in my opinion, especially outdoors in wind and stuff, it's the best way to start a fire. So anyway, little sidetrack there, but
But how do you make charcoal?
so charcoal, you're literally just pulling the gas, largely most of it, not quite all of it. You're pulling the gas out of the wood, and then you have to. So you start a fire. You can like, out here we could just dig a hole in the ground. I did it with a 55-gallon drum that had the top of it has a little. It's called a bung in the top. You unscrew that, so you have a place for the wood gas to come out, and you have to visually watch as you're doing this. You load up the drum with a bunch of wood. So in my case, without getting too complex, I just cut the drum in half so I could load up a bunch of wood in the bottom, and then I put the top of it back on with the hole. I took the cover off the bung, and I put that whole barrel into a fire that I had going. So I'm heating up the whole barrel.
Okay.
And then I'm watching as the barrel's sitting in the fire, that wood inside, it's not getting all of the oxygen. That's obviously you need oxygen. You need the air for the wood to burn, for anything to burn. So the wood is in essence largely smothered in there, but what'll happen as it heats up, remember we just talked about how you can extract the wood gas mechanically by heating the wood. Well, it's not burning inside of there because you don't have the oxygen, but you are heating it up enough because the barrel's sitting in this big fire.
Interesting.
That the wood gas starts coming out. So you just visually watch, and you'll see as the wood gas is coming out of the hole in the top of the barrel, or, I had the barrel, I guess, laying on its side, but you'll see it's like a blowtorch. So all of a sudden that wood gas is coming out, the fire around it catches it, and it's shooting out like a blowtorch. So you just watch that until it takes, considerable amount of time, depending on how much, 55-gallon drum or 30-gallon drum, whatever. But over time you watch that, and as that starts to dissipate, now you want to seal the whole thing up because you don't want it to catch on fire. And then you pull it out of the fire, let it sit, it's sealed. It's not, there's no air getting in there, so the wood's not going to burn, because you don't want it to turn into just, white powdery ash. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You want it to stay in the chunk form. So it still looks like, if you put in pieces like that or whatever, round, branches, whatever, you don't want it to be too big because you want to extract the gases out of it efficiently. But you pull it out and it looks largely the same size pieces that you put in, but now it's charcoal. Like many of you, I'm sure, have if not purchased wood charcoal for your charcoal grill. Like I don't use briquettes and stuff. I always buy the wood. If I'm buying it, I buy the wood charcoal. So it's that stuff where you can, break it apart with your hands. It's very, very easy to bust up, smack it with a hammer or whatever. But yeah, so, or, you've had a campfire, for example, and it rains, and then it puts out the fire. So you've now effectively smothered it so the wood doesn't continue to burn. And now it is charcoal. It's, you can take and write on a sidewalk with it or whatever. It's that, you know what I'm talking about.
So what do you do with it then? Short of you could barbecue with that, how does that help the chickens? How does that help the garden? How does that help soil?
Well, charcoal has an enormous amount of surface area because it's extremely porous. You've taken think of it like it just has like an enormous amount of tunnel systems in it. So just a little, and I don't know my numbers exactly, but just a little chunk of charcoal, actual wood charcoal, has about as much surface area as like a football field, which sounds insane. But it's something like that. It has just an enormous amount of surface area because it's so porous, and you can't really see visually. I mean, you could under a microscope, but that enables a lot of the bacteria and things in the soil to take hold and live within that. So, and that is what you want. You want to be able to infuse as much of the good bacteria and little things that are growing in there. You want to be able to infuse your wood charcoal with as much of that as possible, and that's where you get into biochar. Biochar is where you create that charcoal, but then you can take that stuff and soak it, for example, in some, maybe you've got a bunch of weeds and stuff that you pulled out. You can put all kinds of stuff in, but you get a barrel or a big bucket or whatever, and you have this stuff sit in there and just let it kind of rot, let it just degrade and get nasty, and it'll smell and whatnot. I know Carrie Ann loves this. you know, you could put worm castings in it. You can do all kinds of things to really enrich that, and then put your charcoal in that specifically, and it will then absorb. Charcoal is extremely absorbent. Don't let it sit out in the rain and get wet, or you're ruining it. Before you do this, it has to, you know, create your charcoal. It's got to stay dry. Can't have gotten all wet and whatnot, because then it's filling up with things you don't want it to fill up with. But then infuse it with, you know, whatever it is. And I know, again, sounds gross, but, you know, there are a lot of people out there and out in the sticks that will use urine to do this as well. Yeah, I mean, it is what it is, right? It's been around for thousands and thousands of years. And it creates some of the most nutrient dense, rich soil. It's just absolutely amazing for your gardens. So that is a way, and you can certainly do that at your home. You can just
So
go
you
buy.
just sprinkle it in, or do you put it in the hole before?
So you take your charcoal and you let it sit in this bucket of goo, as it were. And then, yeah, you just take that out and spread it around in your garden. You know,
Oh,
let it sit
okay.
let it sit in there
Like fertilizer then.
for a day or two. Yeah, you can take it out, smash it up, then throw it around your
Oh,
garden.
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Interesting.
just sprinkle it right on top. You don't have to bury it or anything.
So what other things do you use that are just around the house that people have that they wouldn't think about?
It's like, I mean, you could do it with your grass clippings. You could do it with any, you know, weeds, with any whatever. Again, you could do it with urine. We all have that.
Ew.
You could do it, you know, with some leaves, just any scraps. You could do it with food scraps, not meat. Don't use meat. But yeah, any food scraps, veggies, stuff like that. Toss it all in a bucket and just let it kind of putrefy. Throw some water in there and just let it go, and leave it for, you know, probably a week or two. If it's warm out, you know, it cooks faster. But yeah, so really easy to do. And just amazing fertilizer. Like, you're not going to do anything better for your garden than that. And you don't have to actually, you know, go through the whole process of making your own charcoal. Go to the store. I mean, I think, where was I? Costco has a massive bag of, you know, I don't know, it's like a 60, 70 pound bag of wood chunk charcoal. You don't have to buy something that big. You can get it at most grocery stores and stuff. They all sell it.
Small bags.
Just go get yourself a little bag of it, and then use that. That's ideal.
Fascinating.
Saves a lot
And
of work.
cost is really minimal.
Yeah, it costs almost nothing.
And it's super healthy for the garden.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
This is all organic, by the way. Everything we're talking about helps you craft your own organic garden, regardless of what the size is, which is what's so cool about it. We've got quite a lot of land here. People say, what are you going to do with all of that? Well, you know, we've got this property and we have the ability to do freeze drying. So we're experimenting with those types of options to help. It's shocking when you have a family of 5 and you're entertaining how fast you can consume a garden of fresh vegetables. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
It really is. So share with all of our viewers, what are the things you're growing right now this year? And how do you see the harvest season going August, September? And what will you freeze dry? Everything? How will you do that, or can?
Yeah, well, just pretty much everything can be freeze dried. I mean, we're even, when it comes to freeze drying, like things are in season and really good. Like I didn't get around to getting strawberries going. Like I would love to do a lot of strawberries. Not that I eat them necessarily, but my kids do, and, you know, we can put it in all kinds of things. But that's just an example of where, if a person had a freeze dryer where you can go and stock up on things. There's like strawberries, for example. Well, they're great and fresh and sweet and, you know, organic, everything. Stock up on those and then freeze dry it right away. We've got a great little farm, not even 5 minutes from here. It's a blueberry farm, so we can go there and harvest fresh blueberries and do the same thing. We do have a few blueberry plants, but again, we're so far behind because of all the projects that we have to do. We're really behind on gardening, and every one of these big garden beds I make, that takes me a day or two, even with a tractor. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Um,
It'll be great moving forward, but a lot of front loading work because we walked into a lot of projects when we came out here.
yeah, a ton. I've got I think 8 of those done right now, and we've got a whole bunch more to do. But in terms of what we're growing, we'll
Mhm.
do a lot of like squash, pumpkin, cucumbers, zucchini.
Mhm.
Um, this fall, I'll get some probably do some raised beds. So like I want to do get a bunch of garlic going,
Mhm. So
um,
fun.
asparagus. I love asparagus. Um, lots of lettuces, different types of lettuces. Arugula. Arugula is
Mhm.
one of
My
the
favorite.
yeah. It's oh my gosh, so peppery. Yeah, but it's one of the healthiest. If you're gonna, it's actually a brassica, which I didn't really realize. I'm learning.
Mhm.
It's in the brassica family.
So
Just
healthy.
yeah, it's actually one of the best if you're gonna eat a lot of if you're gonna eat salads and stuff. Make sure you've got arugula in everything. There's just an amazing number of health benefits. Um,
And there really truly is nothing better, everyone, than being able to carry your menu creation, if you will, especially in a seasonal climate. Now that we are really focused on this effort and have the space to do it, and are really, we could have done this in town as well. And we did have small gardens. We're just taking it to another level because this environment lends itself to it. And in doing so, we can share these stories. But really, where it's put our brain, because that's where we're focused right now, is being able to take advantage of all of this so we can enjoy this food in the winter months because we're in a cold climate. So 6 months of the year, there's a lot of things we're doing that you can't even get your hands on in the grocery store because, as we all know, there's growing seasons for everything. So it's kind of cool that way to be able
we'll
to do
extend the
that.
growing season as one of the many projects down the road, building a greenhouse.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I have ideas that I
Yes, he
haven't that I
does.
haven't shared with you. So
So, regardless of the size, what we wanted to share today is the Hugo Culture Garden. We're going to be doing now, midsummer and end. So, at the end of the growing season, we'll do this again and show you the evolution of what happened so you can see the outcome of it from beginning to end. We have a short growing season here, so we have to be mindful of that, all of us in Minnesota specifically. All of these ideas are something you can utilize anywhere you live, anywhere in the world. Just the growing seasons for many are much more extended. But the fundamental growing pattern of a garden like we're building, regardless of how small or how large you want to make it, is not only a mindful way to garden in an organic way, but it's beautiful, a beautiful thing to do for your land. It's such a healthy way to take care of what is now becoming a very precious commodity, which is our soil.
yeah, soil. I mean, that
Mhm.
at the end of the day, that's really what it boils down to is we're trying to grow soil,
Mhm.
good, rich, natural, chemical free
Chemical free.
earth
Mhm.
from which, we get everything else. I mean, we'll use this to feed our chickens. We'll use this to feed our dogs.
Mhm.
There's a lot of just a
That's a whole other subject we'll do as a separate episode, is just feeding the dogs. It's amazing what they can eat out of that garden. They love it.
yeah, and it's really
Mhm.
good for them. Pumpkin in particular, like just as one little tidbit, one little
Mhm.
spoiler, sneak peek, I guess, to an
Mhm.
episode on feeding dogs
Yeah.
is um, like we don't give our dogs dewormer, chemical dewormer. Feed them pumpkin. You feed them pumpkin, they're not going to have, you don't have a worm problem.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
They
Who
love it.
knew?
It's super healthy for them. We put some in every meal. That's just one of many things that we do
Mhm.
to have healthy, happy, vibrant dogs that don't need to go to the vet and don't need those chemicals put in their body.
Mhm. Steve is like a scientist. And
No,
for those who are following us, he's a chef as well.
Steve's an avid YouTube watcher, so Steve learns about whatever it is he wants to learn because he hops on the old YouTube.
Yeah. Well, that takes
Soon to be
time.
Twitter, by the way. I don't know if you know that, but Twitter is really getting heavy into video.
Oh, really?
They're gonna take over YouTube.
There you go. You never know. It's the world of technology. I think being able to take all the knowledge and all the time and research, and knowing that there's actual proven process and implementing it and then sharing it is our goal with not only DIY Designer Homestead. You'll be seeing more from Steve with his Backwoodsy brand, which we'll talk about on YouTube on another episode. And we film Fly the Coop for a sharing opportunity on a myriad of stories. And I always love having my love Steve on because there's so much to share here. And I think anybody who has a home or is living life there's a nugget here for you for sure. So
yeah, if you don't have a garden, start a garden.
yes, do you have
you're crazy,
start
you're crazy not to start a garden, especially, I mean, with all there's a lot of, in the news, a lot of food shortages, a lot of people saying they can't find certain things at the stores, or that produce that they're buying today is already like rotted by the time they bring it home.
The true thing.
It's running rampant. So yeah, grow a garden, just start growing something, just anything. Grow a tomato plant, grow some peppers, grow something simple. If you don't want to get too complex, don't get too complex, but start growing something.
So from somebody who loves the country and the city both, I'll end it with this and you can verify the actual size. But when we lived in town and during COVID, actually, when we were spending time outside and gardening, there was a measurement in a yard. We had actually done a measurement, and when you plant that garden in one yard, how many people it can feed. Do you remember what the calculation of that is?
I don't, but it obviously depends on what you're planting.
Yeah.
And succession planting and all that stuff.
It's a lot. I mean, you can feed a lot of people with a very small garden, just so you're aware.
Yeah. And there's people that make, that sell, like especially lettuces and things like that, where they just have a city lot, a typical average city lot, that are selling it, but they're making, $100,000 to $200,000 a year just selling fresh lettuces and things. So yeah, I mean, that means it's a lot of food that they're raising on a city lot. So yeah, you can absolutely do it. Yeah. And you can build, if you have terrible soil, like we're all clay here. If you have terrible soil, you can amend it. You can make it better. You can do hugelkultur. You can invest a little bit up front and just have amazing results for years to come without more money going in. So it's a good way to do it.
There you go, everybody. A little tidbit from DIY Designer Homestead on the podcast Fly the Coop. We're so glad to have you on today, Steve. Thank you.
Happy to be here. The chickens maybe not so much because I'm supposed to be tending them.
Yeah, got to go back out. So we're done. We shared.
All right.
Thank you. We appreciate you.
I'll appreciate you too.
We love you all. We'll see you next time on Fly the Coop. Thank you so much.
Bye.